Consider this: 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor sat alone in his tent, surrounded by the chaos of war, and wrote these words in his journal: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That emperor was Marcus Aurelius, a leader whose wisdom still echoes today because it wasn't just about ruling an empire, it was about mastering oneself. Stoicism, the philosophy he lived by, isn't some dusty relic of the past. It's a toolkit for anyone who wants to build unshakable resilience, lead with clarity, and leave a legacy that outlasts them. Think about it: how many of us get caught up in the noise of daily life, reacting to every setback, every distraction, as if we're powerless? But what if you could train yourself to respond like a Stoic, calm, focused, and unwavering, no matter what storms come your way? This video isn't just about ancient wisdom, it's about how you can use these principles right now to forge a life of strength and leadership. Legacy isn't just about what you leave behind, it's about how you show up every day. The Stoics knew this. They understood that true power comes from self-discipline, from choosing your reactions, from turning obstacles into opportunities. And here's the thing: you don't need a throne or an army to apply these lessons. Whether you're leading a team, a family, or simply your own life, the Stoic insights we're about to explore will help you build something lasting. Over the next 38 insights, we'll dive deep into the practices that shaped history's greatest thinkers and leaders. But this isn't just a history lesson. It's a challenge to rise above the ordinary, to cultivate courage in the face of fear, and to lead with purpose. Imagine looking back years from now, knowing you lived with intention, that your choices mattered. That's the Stoic legacy, ready to begin. What if you could eliminate half your worries today by focusing only on what's truly within your power? The Stoics called this the Dichotomy of Control, a simple but radical idea that divides life into two categories: what we can influence and what we cannot. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's most influential Stoic teachers, put it bluntly: some things are within our power while others are not. Your thoughts, your actions, your choices, these belong to you. The weather, other people's opinions, traffic jams, these do not. Yet how often do we exhaust ourselves trying to change the unchangeable? Take a modern workplace example. You can control preparing thoroughly for a presentation, speaking clearly, and answering questions with confidence. But you can't control whether your boss will like it or if a colleague interrupts with criticism. The Stoic approach: pour your energy into the preparation, the part you own, and release the rest. When you do this, something shifts. Stress loses its grip because you're no longer fighting invisible battles. Here's the challenge: think of one thing weighing on you right now. Is it truly within your control? If not, what would it feel like to let go of the struggle and redirect that effort towards something you can actually shape? This isn't about giving up, it's about focusing your strength where it matters. The irony: the more you practice this, the more resilient you become. Because real power isn't in controlling the world around you, it's in mastering your response to it. True leadership starts with mastering yourself, not with titles, not with authority, but with the quiet, relentless discipline of showing up as your best even when no one is watching. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher and advisor to emperors, put it plainly: no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. What he meant was this: self-discipline isn't about punishment or deprivation. It's the daily practice of choosing what matters over what's easy, so when challenges come, and they always do, you're ready. History gives us a striking example in Cato the Younger, a Roman senator whose discipline became legendary. During military campaigns, he insisted on marching on foot alongside his soldiers, carrying his own gear, sleeping in the same rough conditions. When others indulged in feasts, he ate simple meals not to prove a point but to train his will, his reasoning. If he couldn't resist a soft bed or extra wine, how could he resist the far greater temptations of power and corruption? Cotto understood that leadership isn't just about directing others, it's about holding yourself to a higher standard first. Now, think about your own life. Where are the cracks in your discipline? Maybe it's hitting snooze instead of waking up to work on that project. Maybe it's scrolling when you promised yourself you'd read. The Stoics would say this isn't just about productivity, it's about integrity. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen the core of who you are. And that's where real influence begins. People don't follow titles, they follow those who embody what they preach. Here's the practice. Pick one small thing you've been avoiding or indulging in more than you should. For the next week, attack it with Cotto's ruthlessness, not to punish yourself, but to prove that your will is stronger than your whims. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: mastery isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in the quiet moments when you choose discipline over comfort, again and again, until it becomes who you are. Imagine waking up tomorrow to find everything you rely on, your job, your home, even the people closest to you, gone in an instant. How would you respond? This isn't an exercise in fear. It's a Stoic practice called negative visualization, and it's one of the most powerful tools for building resilience. Seneca, who faced exile and immense personal loss, wrote that we should rehearse misfortune in our minds, not to dwell on despair, but to disarm its power. By confronting worst-case scenarios in advance, we strip them of their ability to shock us when they happen, and we uncover a profound gratitude for what we already have. Take a modern example. Imagine you've just been laid off. The initial panic might feel overwhelming, but if you've practiced negative visualization, something else kicks in, a calm clarity. You've already mentally walked through this scenario. You know your skills remain intact, your relationships still support you, and your ability to adapt is stronger than any setback. That's the Stoic advantage. You've rehearsed not just the loss, but the path forward. Now, try this today. Pick one thing you depend on daily: your phone, your morning coffee, even your commute. Close your eyes and picture life without it. Notice the frustration, then ask yourself, how would I adjust? That discomfort you feel, that's the space where resilience grows. The Stoics weren't morbid, they were practical. By regularly reflecting on impermanence, they cultivated a fierce appreciation for the present and an unshakable confidence in their ability to endure. Here's the deeper truth hidden in this practice: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The job loss, the rejection, the failure, they're rarely as catastrophic as our minds predict. Negative visualization trains you to face life's uncertainties without flinching, because you've already stood in that fire and discovered you won't burn. So tonight, before sleep, ask yourself, what if today was the last time I had this? Then wake up tomorrow and let that awareness sharpen your focus, deepen your gratitude, and steel your resolve. Because the Stoics knew something we often forget: the best way to hold onto something isn't with fear, it's with open hands. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. That's the essence of Stoic courage, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. Think about the last time you had to speak in front of a crowd, pitch an idea to a skeptical room, or make a tough call knowing criticism would follow. Your palms might have sweated, your voice might have wavered, but courage isn't about silencing those reactions. It's about letting them ride shotgun while you keep driving toward what matters. Stoic courage flips the script on fear. It doesn't ask you to pretend discomfort doesn't exist. It asks you to redefine what discomfort means. To a Stoic, fear isn't a stop sign. It's a signal that you're growing, that you're stepping into territory worth exploring. Consider Rosa Parks, who once said her refusal to give up her seat wasn't because she lacked fear, but because she refused to let fear dictate her choices. That's Stoic courage in action, recognizing the trembling in your hands and still raising them to do what's right. Now, let's bring this closer to home. What's one fear quietly holding you back from leading more boldly? Maybe it's the dread of rejection when proposing a new idea at work, or the vulnerability of admitting you don't have all the answers. Here's the Stoic reframe: that fear isn't your enemy, it's proof you care deeply about the outcome. The question isn't how to eliminate the fear, it's how to act in spite of it. Start small, speak up in a meeting when you'd normally stay quiet. Send that email you've been overthinking. Each time you do, you're not just overcoming a moment of discomfort, you're rewiring your relationship with fear itself. Because here's the truth every great leader learns eventually: courage isn't a grand one-time gesture. It's the daily practice of showing up when your instincts scream to retreat. The Stoics didn't wait for fearlessness. They built legacies by walking straight through their fears, one deliberate step at a time. Your turn. What's the next step only you can take? Is your obstacle really a roadblock or a stepping stone in disguise? Marcus Aurelius faced this question daily as emperor, writing in his private journal. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. He wasn't just philosophizing, he was surviving wars, betrayals, and plagues by mastering one skill: perspective. Consider Thomas Edison's lab burning to the ground at 67, decades of research vanishing in flames. His response: "Thank goodness all our mistakes are burned up. Now we can start fresh." That Stoic perspective in action, seeing not loss but liberation from past errors. The fire didn't change his circumstances, it revealed his character. Here's the shift the Stoics practiced: challenges aren't disruptions to your path, they are the path. A missed promotion isn't just rejection, it's time to hone skills you've neglected. A broken relationship isn't merely pain, it's clarity about what you truly value. The obstacle doesn't move, you do, by circling it, climbing it, or dismantling it brick by brick. Right now, bring to mind a challenge weighing on you. What if you saw it as training rather than torment? A difficult coworker becomes a patience coach. A tight budget transforms into a creativity accelerator. This isn't naive optimism, it's strategic reframing. The Stoics called it the art of turning lead into gold, where the alchemy happens not in the event, but in your interpretation of it. So tonight, try this. Write down one current struggle, then beneath it, answer: how is this preparing me for what's next? That blank space beneath your problem. That's where your power lies, because perspective isn't just about seeing differently, it's about acting differently once you do. The tighter you grip, the less you hold, a truth that applies as much to sand slipping through clenched fingers as it does to our obsession with outcomes. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery before teaching emperors, put it bluntly: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. His wisdom cuts through our modern anxiety like a compass in a storm. Focus on the effort, release the result. Think of a professional athlete stepping onto the field. They can control their training, their strategy, their focus in the moment, but not the final score. The Stoic approach isn't passive resignation. It's fierce commitment to what you can influence, paired with serene acceptance of what you can't. A basketball player doesn't obsess over the buzzer-beating shot while it's mid-air. They perfect their form, trust their practice, and let go. The paradox. This detachment often leads to better performance because energy wasted worrying about outcomes is redirected into purposeful action. Now turn the lens on yourself. Where are you white-knuckling an outcome right now? That promotion you're desperate to land, the relationship you're straining to fix, the creative project you've stalled because you fear it won't be perfect. The Stoics would ask, what if you poured that same intensity into the process instead? Detachment isn't indifference, it's recognizing that your worth isn't tied to external validation. A chef can't control whether every diner loves their dish, but they can master each chop, simmer, and seasoning. Here's the practice. Pick one goal where you've been fixated on the result. Write down every action within your control to move toward it. Then, and this is the Stoic shift, mentally release the outcome, not as defeat, but as trust. Trust in your effort. Trust that even if the outcome changes, you remain unshaken. Because true freedom isn't getting everything you want. It's wanting nothing so desperately that it steals your peace. The irony, the less you cling, the more you're able to receive. Great leaders lead quietly. Ego shouts, wisdom whispers. This was Seneca's lesson to his student Lucilius in their famous letters, that true authority doesn't need to announce itself. Picture a CEO who credits their team for successes but takes personal responsibility for failures, or a coach who listens more than they lecture. That's Stoic humility in action, strength wrapped in quiet confidence, influence without insistence. History gives us a masterclass in this through George Washington. After winning the Revolutionary War, his officers urged him to seize power as a king. Instead, he resigned his commission and returned to his farm, a move that stunned the world. Why? Because Washington understood what the Stoics taught. Leadership isn't about the title, it's about the example. His humility didn't weaken his authority, it cemented his legacy. Centuries later, we remember not his demands for obedience, but his willingness to walk away from absolute power. Now, let's turn the mirror on ourselves. Where might your ego be distorting your leadership? Maybe it's the urge to dominate conversations instead of listening, or the discomfort of admitting when you're wrong. The Stoics had a practice for this. They'd appoint a mind guard, a trusted friend or journal, to call out their blind spots. Try this today. After a meeting or decision, ask, did I lead to serve or to be seen? That moment of honest reflection is where humility begins. Here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. The less you need credit, the more trust you earn. A humble leader doesn't shrink from challenges. They simply stop making everything about themselves. Their power comes not from towering over others, but from lifting them up. So next time you're tempted to assert your importance, pause. Ask Seneca's question. What would wisdom whisper here? Then let your actions answer. Before the sun even rose, Marcus Aurelius would sit with his journal, steeling himself for the day ahead with a simple question. What is in my character to do today? This wasn't idle reflection, it was a battle plan for living with purpose. His morning ritual, detailed in Meditations, wasn't about productivity hacks or motivational quotes. It was a mental armor forging session, anticipating challenges and reaffirming his values before the world could impose its chaos. Here's how you can adapt this practice today. First, carve out just 5 minutes before checking your phone or diving into tasks. Ask yourself 2 Stoic questions. What potential obstacles might arise today, and how will I meet them with integrity? And what qualities do I choose to embody regardless of external pressures? This isn't about predicting every curveball, it's about preparing your mindset to handle them. Picture a firefighter suiting up before a call. They don't know what the blaze will look like, but they know how they'll respond. For a modern twist, pair this with a premeditation of kindness. Decide in advance one small act of generosity you'll offer, whether it's patience with a frustrating coworker or an unprompted word of encouragement. The Stoics believed kindness was a strength, not a weakness, and morning reflection was their rehearsal space for it. Now, here's your challenge. Tonight, place a notebook by your bed. Tomorrow, before reaching for your phone, write one intention, not a to-do item, but a way of being. Maybe it's, I will listen more than I speak in meetings, or I'll respond to delays with calm creativity. That blank page is your training ground, because here's what Marcus knew: mornings don't just start the day, they start the person you'll become in it. Would you act the same if no one was watching? That question cuts to the heart of Stoic ethics, not just what we do when others are judging, but who we become in the quiet moments when only our conscience bears witness. Epictetus, who was traded as a slave before shaping Stoic philosophy, put it plainly: first decide who you wish to be, then do what you must do. Integrity isn't a performance, it's the alignment between your private choices and your public principles. Take a modern dilemma. Imagine discovering a flaw in your company's product that would cost millions to fix. Reporting it could delay launches and anger shareholders, but staying silent risks harming customers. The Stoic approach: your values aren't situational tools to be picked up or discarded based on convenience. They're the foundation you stand on, especially when standing costs you something. Consider Johnson & Johnson's infamous Tylenol recall in 1982. Faced with poisoned capsules, they pulled 31 million bottles nationwide, costing over $100 million but saving countless lives. That decision wasn't just crisis management, it was ethical consistency in action, proving that real leadership means choosing what's right over what's easy. Now turn the lens inward. Where have you bent your own rules lately? Maybe it's exaggerating a deadline to avoid pushback, or laughing at an offensive joke to fit in. The Stoics called these small betrayals, seemingly harmless compromises that erode your moral compass grain by grain. Here's their challenge: treat every choice, no matter how trivial, as a vote for the person you're becoming. Because integrity isn't built in grand gestures alone. It's fortified in the daily discipline of aligning actions with values when no one's looking. Tonight, try this practice. Replay one decision from today where convenience clashed with principle. Not to judge yourself, but to clarify. Ask, if I repeated this choice for a year, who would I be? That answer reveals more about your character than any resume ever could. The Stoics knew this truth. Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you refuse to surrender along the way. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who endured slavery before shaping emperors, offered this blunt advice: if someone tells you that so and so speaks ill of you, don't defend yourself against what was said, but reply, yes, and he doesn't know the half of it. He'd really have something to say if he knew all my faults. At first glance, that might sound like self-deprecation, but there's a razor-sharp wisdom here. Criticism only stings when we tie it to our self-worth. The Stoics didn't just tolerate criticism, they weaponized it by refusing to let another person's opinion dictate their inner peace. Think about the last time you read a harsh online comment or received unfair feedback at work. Your pulse quickened, your stomach tightened, not because the words held any real power, but because you handed them the keys to your emotional state. Here's the Stoic reframe: criticism is like raindrops hitting a stone. The stone doesn't get softer or harder based on the rain's intensity, it remains unchanged. Your character works the same way. When someone insults your work, they're revealing their own standards, biases, or frustrations, not your value. Take a modern example. Imagine a chef who spent years perfecting a recipe only to have a food blogger dismiss it in one scathing post. The Stoic response isn't to fire back or crumble, it's to ask, does this person know my craft better than I do? Is there a grain of truth here I can use to improve, or is this simply noise? This discernment is the Stoic superpower, separating useful feedback from emotional static. Now, consider your own life. When was the last time criticism derailed your confidence? Maybe it was a passive-aggressive remark from a relative or a dismissive comment in a meeting. The Stoics would challenge you to conduct a simple autopsy. Does this person's opinion define me, or is it merely data? Because here's the truth: you can't control what others say, but you can choose whether to let it echo in your mind or dissolve like mist. Tonight, try this practice. Recall one piece of criticism that still lingers. Write it down, then beneath it, answer two questions. What part of this, if any, helps me grow? And what part reflects the critic's worldview, not my worth? That space between their words and your reaction, that's where your freedom lies, because the Stoics knew something we often forget. The louder the insult, the quieter your resolve should be. Let them shout into the wind while you keep building. A stagnant mind is a dying leader, not in the dramatic sense of collapse, but in the slow, quiet erosion of relevance. Seneca, who spent his life studying, teaching, and writing even as he advised emperors, called learning the nourishment of the soul. He didn't accumulate knowledge to impress others. He devoured philosophy, science, and poetry because he understood a fundamental truth: growth isn't optional for those who lead. It's the oxygen that keeps their influence alive. Consider Benjamin Franklin, who famously ended his days with the question, "What good have I done today?" But what's less known is his relentless commitment to learning. At 20, he created a club for tradesmen to debate ideas and share books. At 40, he taught himself enough science to pioneer discoveries in electricity. At 70, he taught himself enough French to negotiate America's alliance with France during the Revolution. Franklin wasn't just a polymath, he was a living testament to the Stoic belief that curiosity is the antidote to obsolescence. The modern world moves faster than Seneca or Franklin could have imagined. Industries transform overnight, skills expire like milk in the fridge. Yet how many of us treat learning as a phase we outgrow after school, rather than the heartbeat of a meaningful life? The Stoics would warn us, when you stop stretching your mind, you start shrinking your future. It's not about chasing every trend, but about cultivating the discipline to master what matters. A CEO studying behavioral psychology to better understand their team isn't just gaining knowledge. They're modeling the adaptability that defines great leadership. Here's the challenge: pick one skill that would make you a better thinker, leader, or human, not because it's trendy, but because it terrifies you slightly. Maybe it's public speaking, coding, or even understanding basic finance. Commit to 30 minutes a day for the next month, not to check a box, but to prove to yourself that growth isn't about age, it's about appetite. Because the Stoics knew something we often forget. The moment you think you've arrived is the moment you've begun your decline. You don't own time, you borrow it. That stark truth from the Stoics hits harder when you realize Marcus Aurelius wrote his private meditations on mortality while leading an empire through war and plague. He didn't just philosophize about time's scarcity, he felt its weight daily, scribbling reminders like, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This wasn't morbid fixation, it was urgent clarity. The Stoics treated time like a currency you can't earn back, only spend wisely or waste. Consider how differently we approach other limited resources versus time. You'd never pour a rare bottle of wine down the drain, yet how many hours vanish into mindless scrolling? You'd negotiate fiercely over a salary raise, but bargain away entire afternoons to meetings that could have been emails. The modern productivity hack the Stoics would endorse isn't another app or schedule. It's the visceral awareness that every later is a gamble. When Seneca wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it," he exposed our collective delusion. We act like we're rationing minutes when we're actually squandering decades. Here's where Stoic wisdom collides with modern reality. A CEO who blocks her calendar for deep work isn't just optimizing productivity, she's practicing temporal integrity. A parent who puts his phone away at dinner isn't just avoiding distraction, he's paying his highest denomination of attention to what truly expires: childhood. The Stoics called this kairos, recognizing the right moment to act, not because the clock demands it, but because your values do. So this week, try their most jarring exercise. Each morning, write down one activity that deserves your fullest time investment, and one you'll decline or delegate, not as a productivity trick, but as a mortality rehearsal. Ask yourself, if this were my last week, would I still trade this hour for that? That question isn't meant to paralyze, it's meant to activate, because the great irony is this: those who stare time's finitude in the face don't live with more fear. They live with fewer regrets. What does your anger cost you? Not in the moment when your pulse races and your vision narrows, but afterward. The apology you have to make, the trust you erode, the hours lost stewing in resentment. Seneca, who wrote an entire essay dissecting anger, called it brief insanity. He wasn't just moralizing, he was analyzing anger's mechanics like a scientist studying a toxin. When we explode, he observed, we surrender control to the very thing we're trying to conquer. Think about that: anger doesn't prove your strength, it hijacks it. Seneca's remedy wasn't suppression, but something far more strategic: delay. He advised his readers to pause before reacting, even just counting to 10, not to deny the emotion, but to let its fever break. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient wisdom. When we're angry, our amygdala, the brain's alarm system, floods our system with chemicals that can take up to 20 minutes to dissipate. That's why the Stoics practiced what psychologists now call the cooling period. One executive I worked with kept a post-it on his monitor that read, "React at 10 a.m. tomorrow." By then, 90% of his urgent emails didn't need sending. Here's where Stoic anger management gets practical. Next time you feel that heat rising, try this: physically step away. Not as retreat, but as recalibration. Go for a walk, wash dishes, fold laundry. These aren't distractions, they're neural resets. The Roman general Scipio Africanus, known for his unshakable calm in battle, would literally turn his back when provoked, not out of cowardice, but to deny his anger the oxygen of engagement. Now consider your own triggers. Is it disrespect, injustice, feeling unheard? The Stoics would challenge you to dissect that trigger like a puzzle. Anger often masks deeper wounds: fear of inadequacy, loss of control. When a colleague takes credit for your idea, the sting isn't just about recognition. It taps into primal fears of being overlooked or undervalued. Identifying that root lets you address the real wound instead of slapping a bandage on the symptom. Tonight, try Seneca's exercise. Replay your last angry outburst, not to judge yourself, but to investigate. Ask, what did I truly want in that moment? And did anger bring me closer to it? Because here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. The more willing you are to sit with your anger instead of unleashing it, the more power you reclaim. Not as a tyrant ruling by rage, but as a leader who chooses when and if to wield fire. The most powerful words a leader can speak are often the ones they choose not to say. That's the Stoic paradox of influence. Sometimes strength looks like silence. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who led Rome through constant turmoil, wrote in his private journal, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." He wasn't just talking about managing emotions, he was revealing a leadership superpower, the discipline of restraint. Think about the last high-stakes meeting you attended. The person who spoke least probably commanded the most respect. Why? Because silence isn't passivity, it's the space where wisdom gathers its weight. Consider a tense negotiation scenario. One side keeps talking, filling every pause with concessions or justifications. The other sits quietly, absorbing, letting the pressure build. Who holds the real power? The Stoics knew this instinctively. Epictetus taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen twice as much as we speak. Modern research confirms it. Top FBI hostage negotiators use strategic silence as their most effective tool, often saying nothing for minutes to let the other party reveal critical information or reconsider their stance. Silence isn't empty, it's a mirror that reflects others' intentions back at them. Now test this in your own life. When you rush to fill quiet moments with unnecessary words? Maybe it's interrupting to prove your expertise or defending a decision before others have fully voiced concerns. The Stoic leader resists that impulse. They understand that silence does 3 transformative things. It disarms aggression. People can't argue with someone who isn't reacting. It signals confidence you're secure enough not to need constant validation, and it creates space for better solutions to emerge. Here's the practice. In your next conversation, count to 5 after the other person finishes speaking, not as a manipulative tactic, but as training in intentional stillness. Notice what surfaces, their unspoken concerns, your own knee-jerk reactions, even creative ideas that wouldn't have emerged in a rapid-fire exchange. The ancient Stoics had a name for this, hesychia, the sacred pause between stimulus and response. That gap is where your real authority lies, because leadership isn't about having the loudest voice in the room. It's about having the presence that makes the room lean in when you finally choose to speak. As the sun dips below the horizon and the noise of the day fades, there's a quiet power in pausing to ask yourself one simple question: how did I live today? Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised emperors, ended every evening with this ritual, not as a self-scolding exercise, but as a gentle audit of his own humanity. He'd review conversations, decisions, even fleeting thoughts, asking not what went wrong, but what can I learn? Picture him in his candlelit study, weighing each moment like a merchant counting coins at closing time, except his currency was virtue, his ledger a life well lived. Here's how you can adapt his practice tonight. Grab any notebook, no fancy journal required, and divide the page into 3 columns. In the first, jot down one moment where you acted with integrity, no matter how small. Maybe you listened deeply instead of waiting to speak, or chose patience in a frustrating moment. The second column is for reflections. Where did you fall short of your own standards? Not to dwell in guilt, but to spot patterns. That sharp reply to a coworker might reveal a trigger worth examining. The third column is Seneca's secret weapon. What will I do differently tomorrow? This isn't about overhauling your life overnight, it's about incremental alignment. A single sentence suffices. I'll pause before reacting to emails, or I'll express gratitude before criticism. Modern psychology backs this ancient habit. Studies on implementation intentions show that people who reflect on daily lessons and plan specific adjustments are far more likely to follow through. Think of it as mental hygiene, brushing away the day's residue so tomorrow starts fresh. A CEO client of mine uses this method to debrief high-stakes meetings, not just analyzing outcomes but examining his own presence. Did I lead or just dominate? Did I leave room for quieter voices? Now, here's your prompt for tonight. What's one lesson from today that deserves to travel into tomorrow? Maybe it's the realization that rushing through tasks leaves you emptier than doing fewer with care. Or that your best ideas came during an unplanned walk, not a forced brainstorming session. The Stoics believed wisdom wasn't in grand epiphanies, but in these daily breadcrumbs of awareness. Your evening reflection isn't a chore, it's the quiet conversation where you mentor your future self. Because here's the truth Seneca knew: days turn into years, and years into a legacy. The person you become isn't shaped by sweeping declarations, but by these nightly reckonings where you hold yourself accountable with the same kindness you'd offer a devoted student. So tonight, before sleep claims you, steal 5 minutes. Let the day speak its lessons, then close the journal, blow out the candle, and rest knowing you've already begun tomorrow's work. Rigid oaks splinter in hurricanes while bamboo bends and springs back. Nature's lesson in survival mirrors the Stoics' call for adaptability. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire in constant flux, wrote, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." He wasn't just observing the inevitable, he was preparing for it. Consider Blockbuster's downfall. A billion-dollar empire collapsed not because they failed at their original model, but because they refused to evolve when Netflix offered change on a silver platter. The Stoics would nod knowingly. Obstinacy isn't strength, it's fragility in disguise. Now, zoom into your own life. Where are you clinging to an outdated approach because it's comfortable? Maybe it's holding onto a business strategy that's clearly plateauing, or resisting feedback that challenges your methods. The Stoic practice here is simple yet uncomfortable. Regularly ask, "What if I'm wrong?" Not as self-doubt, but as intellectual flexibility. When the founder of Slack pivoted from a failing gaming company to a communication tool, he didn't see it as defeat. He saw it as aligning with reality. That's the heart of Stoic adaptability, not blind acceptance of every trend, but the discernment to bend without breaking. Here's the exercise. Pick one area where you've been stubbornly resisting change. Play out the worst-case scenario if you adapt, then the worst case if you don't. Often, you'll find the risk isn't in changing, it's in staying still. Like a river that carves canyons by yielding to the terrain, your resilience grows when you flow with circumstance rather than fighting it. The Stoics didn't worship change, they mastered the art of riding its currents. Your turn. What storm are you trying to outmuscle that might require a more flexible stance? Your greatest power isn't controlling what happens, it's loving what happens. That's the radical heart of amor fati, the Stoic practice of embracing fate so fully that you wouldn't rewrite a single chapter of your story, even the painful ones. Nietzsche, who called this concept his formula for greatness, didn't just admire it, he lived it. When crippling migraines and failing eyesight threatened to end his writing career, he didn't rage against his body. He called his suffering the hammer that shapes me, and produced his most profound work in its shadow. That's the alchemy of amor fati, turning what should break you into what builds you. Now let's make this personal. Years ago, I lost a job I'd poured my identity into. The rejection letter felt like a verdict: you're not good enough. For weeks, I replayed every mistake, every what if. Then I stumbled on Epictetus's question, what if this happened for you, not to you? So I tried an experiment. I wrote down 3 ways the loss might serve me. At first, it felt forced until I realized the layoff had freed me to pursue work that actually aligned with my values. That pivot led me here to you. The Stoics would say that's no accident. When you stop resisting reality and start interrogating its gifts, even the darkest turns reveal hidden paths. Here's the challenge. Think of one current struggle you've been resenting. Maybe it's a failed project, a strained relationship, or a health setback. Now ask, how could this be the exact training ground I need? A startup founder I know reframed her company's near collapse as a masterclass in resilience, skills she later used to build a thriving new venture. That's amor fati in action, not passive acceptance but active curiosity. Tonight, try this ritual. Write the unwanted situation at the top of a page. Below it, answer, what is this teaching me that comfort never could? The answer might not come immediately, but the question itself shifts your stance, from victim of circumstance to student of life. Because the Stoics knew a secret modern psychology confirms, the stories we tell about our challenges determine whether they crush us or forge us. Your fate isn't just something to endure, it's the raw material of your strength, waiting to be loved into meaning. What's truly enough for you, not according to society's benchmarks or your neighbor's new car, but by the quiet measure of your own contentment. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who amassed great wealth only to renounce it later, wrote in on the shortness of life. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. His target wasn't just idle hours, it was the endless chase for more that leaves us feeling emptier with each acquisition. The Stoics didn't reject wealth, they redefined it. To them, true riches weren't counted in coins but in the freedom to live without craving them. Consider the minimalist movement today, people living in tiny homes or with fewer than 100 possessions. At first glance, it seems radical, but dig deeper and you'll find a Stoic principle at work, subtracting distractions to amplify what matters. A tech executive I know keeps a luxury audit journal. Every month he asks, what did I pay for this month that didn't add value to my life? The first time he realized he'd spent thousands on premium cable channels he never watched, a gym membership he barely used, and impulse upgrades on flights. The real cost wasn't the money, it was the mental clutter of maintaining all those unused extras. Here's the Stoic litmus test for wealth. Does it expand your freedom or your anxieties? A sprawling mansion might mean more space, but also more repairs, more cleaning, more worries about security. Seneca lived this tension firsthand. As Nero's advisor, he had access to imperial riches, yet he wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor." His insight, wealth becomes toxic when it shifts from a tool to a master. The billionaire obsessed with gaining another million is no richer than the miser counting pennies. Both are enslaved by lack. Now turn the lens on yourself. What luxuries could you live without, not as a deprivation exercise, but as a liberation experiment? Maybe it's that third streaming service you barely open, or the closet full of clothes you never wear. The Stoics would urge you to try this. For 1 week, remove one non-essential you've taken for granted. Notice what fills the space, not just in your home, but in your mind. Because here's the paradox they uncovered. The less you need to be happy, the more powerful you become. Real wealth isn't about accumulation. It's about the unshakable knowing that you're already whole. Tonight, try Seneca's practice. Open your calendar or bank statement and circle 3 things that consume time or money without adding meaning. Then ask, if I let these go, what better uses could that space serve? The answer might surprise you, because the Stoics knew something we often forget. Enough isn't a number, it's a mindset you choose, one deliberate no at a time. A Roman legion didn't wander into battle hoping to stumble upon victory. Every step was calculated, every formation deliberate. That same precision defined Stoic leadership. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded armies while writing philosophy, advised himself daily, concentrate every minute like a Roman on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness. Notice he didn't say, work harder or move faster. He said, "Do it with intent." Modern research reveals why this matters. People who articulate clear intentions before acting are 19% more likely to follow through. The difference between busyness and purpose isn't effort, it's alignment. Consider two architects given the same materials to build a house. One starts laying bricks randomly, proud of how many they've placed by sundown. The other first studies the blueprint, ensuring each brick supports the final structure. Both are working hard, only one is building something lasting. The Stoics were blueprint architects of action. Before speaking, they asked, "Is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?" Before undertaking any task, Epictetus would challenge his students, "What end does this serve?" That simple filter could save most of us from half our wasted efforts. Here's how to apply this today. Borrow a practice from Special Forces training, the 5-paragraph order. Before any significant action, they define 1. Situation, what's the context? 2. Mission, what's the core objective? 3. Execution, what specific steps will achieve it? 4. Logistics, what resources are needed? And 5. Contingencies, what could go wrong and how will we adapt? You don't need a military operation to use this. Planning a difficult conversation, launching a project, even something as simple as your morning routine transforms when you approach it with this clarity. Now bring this home. Tomorrow, before your first task, pause. Ask Marcus Aurelius's question, "What end does this serve?" If the answer is vague or unconvincing, reconsider investing your time there. Intentional action isn't about filling hours, it's about fulfilling purposes. The Stoics didn't leave their legacy by accident. They built it brick by brick, each one laid with unwavering focus on why it mattered. Your turn. What's one action you'll undertake tomorrow, not because it's urgent, but because it's undeniable? Stoics weren't unfeeling statues. They were architects of deep, disciplined empathy. This might surprise those who picture Stoicism as cold detachment, but Marcus Aurelius himself wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." He wasn't advocating emotional numbness, he was training himself to see others' struggles as his own. The Stoic philosopher Hierocles took this further with his famous circles of concern exercise, envisioning empathy as concentric rings. At the center, yourself, then family, community, humanity, and finally all living things. The practice, mentally drawing each circle inward until you treat strangers like kin. Imagine applying that to leadership today. Take a modern manager facing a team member's sudden performance drop. The reactive approach, penalize or replace. The Stoic approach, first ask, what unseen battles might they be fighting? When a sales director at a tech firm noticed her top rep missing targets, she resisted immediate criticism. Instead, she invited him for coffee and learned his child was undergoing serious medical treatment. By temporarily adjusting his workload and connecting him with company resources, she didn't just solve a productivity issue, she strengthened loyalty that outlasted the crisis. That's Stoic empathy, clear-eyed compassion that serves both human and organizational needs. Here's where Stoicism flips conventional wisdom. Empathy isn't about absorbing others' emotions until you're drained. It's about maintaining enough equilibrium to be truly present. Think of an emergency room doctor. They don't sob alongside every grieving family. Their calm becomes the anchor that allows them to serve effectively. The Stoics called this sympatheia, a fellow feeling without self-destruction. In leadership terms, it's the balance between understanding your team's struggles and maintaining the clarity to guide them forward. This week, try Hierocles Circle exercise with one challenging relationship. Maybe it's a colleague who frustrates you or a client who's overly demanding. Before reacting, mentally place them in your inner circle just for a moment. Ask, if this were my sibling or closest friend, how would I respond? You don't need to lower standards, just widen perspective. Because the paradox Stoics uncovered centuries ago still holds. The leaders who change lives aren't those who feel least, but those who harness empathy as a superpower rather than a weakness. Comfort is the silent killer of potential, not because ease is wrong, but because it lulls us into believing we're stronger than we truly are. The Stoics knew this danger intimately. They didn't just preach resilience, they engineered it through a radical practice called voluntary discomfort, deliberately seeking out hardship to immunize themselves against life's inevitable blows. Picture this: Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, would periodically sleep on the floor, wear threadbare clothing, and fast for days, not because he had to, but because he refused to let luxury make him soft. His logic was merciless: set aside a certain number of days to eat only the cheapest food, wear the roughest clothing, and ask yourself, is this what I used to dread? Modern science confirms their wisdom. Researchers at the University of Toronto found that people who regularly practice discomfort, like taking cold showers or fasting, develop higher stress tolerance and emotional regulation. One CEO I know starts every morning with a 60-second ice-cold shower. At first, it seemed extreme until he explained the ripple effects. That daily act of choosing discomfort trains his mind to face boardroom conflicts with the same calm. The cold water isn't the point, it's the mental rehearsal for life's bigger challenges. Here's the Stoic challenge for you: pick one comfort you'll voluntarily surrender this week. Maybe it's skipping the snooze button and waking up an hour earlier to meditate or work out. Maybe it's leaving your phone behind during meals to practice undistracted presence. The goal isn't self-punishment, it's rediscovering your capacity to thrive without relying on external crutches. When Cato the Younger walked barefoot through Rome's snow-covered streets, he wasn't showing off, he was proving to himself that hardship couldn't dictate his limits. Tonight, try this mental exercise. Imagine losing the comfort you depend on most: your bed, your morning coffee, even Wi-Fi. How would you adapt? That momentary discomfort is the gym where your resilience muscles grow. Because here's the truth the Stoics carved into their daily lives: leaders who never test their edges are one crisis away from breaking. Your turn. What comfort will you temporarily release, not to suffer, but to remember how much you can endure? Every leader faces moments when every path forward seems fraught with risk, when saying yes feels reckless and saying no feels cowardly. The Stoics confronted these crossroads with a disarmingly simple question: which choice best aligns with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline? Not which option is safest, or what will others approve of, but where does virtue live here? Their decision-making wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about honoring principles so deeply that discomfort became irrelevant. Consider a modern professional torn between staying in a stable but unfulfilling job or leaping into an uncertain entrepreneurial venture. The Stoic approach wouldn't begin with profit projections or market risks. It would start with self-interrogation. Does staying cultivate courage or complacency? Does leaving serve my purpose or just my impatience? When Tim Ferriss left his six-figure tech job to write the 4-Hour Workweek, he didn't base the choice on guaranteed success. He asked a Stoic question: what's the worst that could happen, and could I live with that? The answer wasn't a spreadsheet, it was a value system. Here's where Stoic decision-making diverges from conventional wisdom. Most of us weigh pros and cons, seeking the right answer. The Stoics sought the aligned answer. Marcus Aurelius made imperial decisions not by popularity but by asking, does this action contribute to the common good? Epictetus, born enslaved, taught that our choices are the only true property we own. Everything else can be taken away. That's why they filtered decisions through 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, seeing reality clearly; courage acting despite fear, justice considering collective impact, and temperance resisting short-term impulses. Now bring this to your own life. What decision have you been circling like a hawk afraid to land? Maybe it's ending a relationship that no longer grows you, or finally launching that side project. Try the Stoic Virtue Audit. Write down the options, then grade each against the 4 virtues. Does one path require more courage but align more deeply with your integrity? Does another offer comfort at the cost of self-respect? The clarity often emerges not in the weighing of outcomes, but in the measuring of character. Tonight, take 5 minutes with this exercise. For that lingering decision, ask, if I chose this purely based on who I want to become, which way would I go? That's the Stoic compass, not pointing toward ease or reward, but toward the version of yourself you're proud to meet in the mirror every morning. Because legacy isn't built in the big, loud moments. It's built in these quiet crossroads where you choose the path that hardens your backbone instead of softening your spine. Even Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor whose wisdom still guides millions today, once sat at the feet of his teacher Rusticus, a man he credited with stripping away his arrogance and teaching him true humility. That's the Stoic paradox of mentorship. The greatest leaders are often those who remain lifelong students. The master-disciple relationship wasn't just a formality in ancient Stoicism. It was the forge where character was hammered into shape. Epictetus, himself a former slave, built an entire school around this principle, telling his students, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. He wasn't just encouraging open-mindedness, he was revealing the secret of all transformative growth, surrendering the illusion of self-sufficiency long enough to let someone else light your path. Fast forward to today, where the most innovative companies institutionalize this ancient practice. At Pixar, every film director is paired with a creative mentor, a seasoned guide who asks tough questions rather than providing easy answers. When Brad Bird directed The Incredibles, his mentor was none other than Steve Jobs, who challenged him to push boundaries rather than play it safe. That's Stoic mentorship in modern form, not about handing down rigid rules, but about creating space for potential to unfold through disciplined guidance. The result, a groundbreaking film that redefined animated storytelling. Now consider your own journey, who sees more in you than you currently see in yourself. Maybe it's a colleague who consistently shares resources with you, or a friend who asks the uncomfortable questions that spark growth. Mentorship doesn't require formal titles. It thrives in the quiet moments when someone invests time in your becoming. And here's the reciprocal truth the Stoics understood. Teaching is often the deepest form of learning. When Seneca wrote his famous letters to Lucilius, he wasn't just shaping a protege. He was refining his own philosophy through the act of explanation. This week, try a dual exercise. First, identify one person whose guidance could elevate your next step, then reach out with a specific question, not a vague request for advice. Second, look around. Who's watching you from the edges of your life, hungry for the very wisdom you take for granted? The Stoic legacy wasn't built in isolation. It was passed hand to hand like a torch in the dark. Your turn to both carry and kindle the flame. Whose opinion of you truly shapes your self-worth, the stranger scrolling past your post, or the person staring back in the mirror? Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who endured slavery before advising emperors, sliced through this dilemma with surgical precision. It's not what others think of you that should trouble you, but what you think of yourself when you see them thinking it. That's the Stoic line in the sand. Reputation is what others believe. Character is what you know to be true. Picture social media as a modern metaphor. Likes and comments are the flickering shadows on Plato's cave wall, while your unshakable values are the sunlight outside. The more you chase the shadows, the farther you wander from real light. History offers a striking case study in Cato the Younger, a Roman senator whose integrity became legendary precisely because he refused to perform for applause. When crowds cheered his speeches, he'd walk away mid-sentence, muttering, "They praise me for what they should censure." Contrast that with today's influencers deleting posts that underperform or altering beliefs to match trending hashtags. The Stoics would call this reputation addiction, the exhausting pursuit of external validation that leaves you hollow no matter how many followers you gain. Now examine your own life. Where are you handing out mental remote controls, letting others dictate your self-esteem? Maybe it's refreshing your inbox for that one boss's approval, or editing your personality to fit different social circles. Here's Epictetus' challenge. If someone handed your body to a passerby, you'd be outraged. Why do you hand over your mind? Every time you prioritize strangers' opinions over your own compass, you're surrendering sovereignty over your soul. Tonight, try this Stoic audit. List 3 areas where you seek validation. Next to each, write what you'd do if no one was watching. That gap between the 2 columns. That's where your freedom lies, because the ancient Stoics uncovered a counterintuitive truth. The less you need applause, the more worthy your performance becomes. Your character isn't built in the spotlight, it's forged in the quiet moments when you act rightly simply because it's right. You could die tomorrow. How does that change today? That jarring question lies at the heart of memento mori, the Stoic practice of reflecting on mortality, not to incite fear, but to sharpen focus. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. He wasn't being morbid, he was engineering urgency. Think of it as a mental hourglass, flipping it daily to remember that time isn't just passing, it's slipping through your fingers. Consider the story of a CEO who survived a near-fatal heart attack. In the ambulance, his panic wasn't about unfinished business deals. It was about the bedtime stories he'd skipped with his daughter, the friends he'd meant to reconnect with, the book he kept postponing to write. That brush with death became his Stoic reset. He returned to work but radically reshaped his priorities, cutting meaningless meetings and delegating tasks that didn't require his unique strengths. Within a year, his company thrived while he regained evenings for family and creative projects. The paradox, confronting death didn't diminish his ambition, it refined it. Now bring this closer to home. If today held your final sunset, what would you stop tolerating? The grudges weighing down your heart, the procrastinated dream collecting dust, the conversations you've avoided out of fear. Memento mori isn't about dwelling on the end, it's about designing a life so vibrant that even if tomorrow never comes, you'd leave no essential words unsaid, no love unexpressed. Here's the practice tonight. Place one small object on your bedside table, a coin, a stone, anything that fits in your palm. As you turn off the light, hold it and ask, did today reflect what truly matters? That tiny ritual becomes your Stoic wake-up call, because the great irony is this: those who remember death most vividly are the ones who squeeze every drop of meaning from life. Not in grand gestures, but in the quiet choices to listen deeply, create boldly, and love without reserve. The hourglass is tipping. What will you do with the sand still left? No Stoic was an island, not even Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire but wrote in his private journal. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love, and to work alongside others who share your purpose. That last part often gets overlooked. The Stoics weren't solitary hermits. They were master collaborators who understood that strength multiplies when woven into the fabric of a team. Picture a rowing crew, 8 athletes moving in perfect sync, each oar slicing the water at the same angle, the same depth, the same moment. No single rower's strength determines the boat's speed. It's the harmony of effort that creates victory. Stoic teamwork operates on the same principle. Individual excellence matters, but collective alignment is what propels you forward. Consider a modern workplace scenario. A software development team faces a critical deadline, but instead of competing for credit or blaming each other for bugs, they adopt a Stoic mindset. The lead developer stays late to help a junior colleague debug code, not because it's her job, but because the project's success matters more than individual recognition. The designer simplifies his flashy interface to accommodate back-end limitations, prioritizing function over ego. These aren't just acts of professionalism, they're living examples of Marcus Aurelius' reminder: what injures the hive injures the bee. The Stoics measured success not by personal glory, but by how well they contributed to something larger than themselves. Now, turn the lens inward. Who on your team has been the unseen backbone of recent successes? Maybe it's the assistant who anticipates problems before they arise, or the colleague who diffuses tension with well-timed humor. The Stoic practice here is simple but profound. Make gratitude actionable. Don't just think, "Sarah's great at keeping meetings on track." Tell her, and better yet, adjust your own behavior to amplify her strengths. When a football coach notices his offensive line protecting the quarterback at all costs, he doesn't just praise them, he designs plays that leverage their sacrifice. That's the Stoic difference. Recognition isn't passive admiration, it's active reinforcement. Tonight, try this exercise. List 3 people whose contributions make your work or life smoother, especially the quiet ones. Then, in the next 48 hours, deliver specific, unexpected acknowledgement. Not a generic "good job," but "the way you streamlined that process saved us 12 hours this month. That's why I trust you with complex tasks." Watch what happens, not just to them, but to you, because the Stoics uncovered a paradox. The more you lift others into the light, the less you need to stand in it yourself. True leadership isn't about being indispensable, it's about creating a team where everyone feels they are. Success tests character more than failure ever could. That's the Stoic paradox few see coming. Seneca, who counseled emperors and witnessed the corrupting power of unchecked prosperity, wrote in his letters, "Fortune is like a river. It sweeps away the light and unburdened, but those who are weighted down with virtue remain unmoved." He wasn't just philosophizing, he was exposing success's hidden trap. The moment we start believing our own press releases, we've already begun the stumble. History is littered with cautionary tales, but few are as stark as the fall of a once-beloved celebrity who skyrocketed to fame only to implode under the weight of their own ego. Take the actor who won an Oscar early in their career, only to spiral into substance abuse and professional exile. At first glance, it's a story about temptation. Look deeper, and you'll see a failure to apply Stoic principles when the spotlight burned brightest. The Stoics would diagnose this as a case of prosperity amnesia, forgetting that success isn't a permanent state, but a fleeting alignment of effort and circumstance. Marcus Aurelius warned himself daily, "You could lose everything in an instant, the applause, the status, the comforts, all borrowed. So how do you stay grounded when the world keeps handing you wins?" The Stoics prescribed 3 antidotes. First, daily negation each morning. Visualize losing what you've gained, not as pessimism, but as immunization against entitlement. A modern CEO who practices this might ask, "If my company vanished tomorrow, who would I be?" Second, selective discomfort. Intentionally disrupt your routines to remember you're more than your accolades. That might mean traveling economy despite affording first class, or answering customer service calls yourself. Third, and most crucially, virtue accounting at day's end. measure your actions not by outcomes, but by whether they reflected wisdom, courage, justice, and discipline. Here's the litmus test. When someone praises you, does it feel like affirmation or fuel? The Stoics celebrated achievements, but only as byproducts of virtuous action. A surgeon doesn't perform for applause, they operate to heal. When the applause comes, it's secondary. That's the mindset shift. Success isn't a throne to rest upon, but a responsibility to steward well. Tonight, try Seneca's exercise. List 3 recent wins, then beside each, write, "This happened because," and fill in the real reasons: teamwork, timing, mentors, luck. Not to diminish your effort, but to contextualize it, because the moment you believe success is yours alone is the moment it starts slipping away. The Stoics knew a truth we often forget: the higher you climb, the more humility becomes your safety net. Marcus Aurelius packed more wisdom into single sentences than most achieve in entire speeches. His journal entries were so concise they could fit on a post-it note, yet they've guided leaders for millennia. That's the Stoic superpower of brevity, distilling complexity into clarity without losing depth. Think of the most impactful TED talks, the ones that linger in your memory long after the applause fades. They don't drown you in data, they offer a single, razor-sharp idea so clear it feels inevitable. The Stoics didn't just admire this skill, they weaponized it. Epictetus could dismantle a student's excuse in 3 words. Is it true? Seneca, whose letters could stretch for pages, still opened each with a thesis so precise it cut like a scalpel. If you wish to be loved, love. Now examine your own communication. Where do you armor your points with unnecessary words? Maybe it's the 5-minute preamble before asking for a raise, or the rambling email that buries the request in paragraph 4. The Stoics would challenge you to practice their subtraction drill. Write your message, then slash it by half, then have it again. What remains isn't just shorter, it's stronger. A tech CEO I know reformed his leadership by adopting this. His 10-slide quarterly reports became 3 bullet points. What worked, what didn't, what's next? His team's productivity soared because clarity cuts through noise like sunlight through fog. Here's the litmus test. If your words were charged by the syllable, what would you pay to keep? That meeting where you repeated yourself to fill silence, the social media caption that circled the point like a nervous vulture. Brevity isn't about saying less, it's about respect. Respect for your audience's time, respect for your idea's potency, respect for the truth that needs no decoration. Tonight, try this. Take one message you've been overcomplicating, a difficult conversation, a project pitch, and strip it to its skeleton. Not, "I've been thinking we might possibly consider," but "here's why this matters." The Stoics knew something we often forget. The heavier the truth, the lighter your words should carry it. Your turn. Where have you been adding weight when flight would serve you better? A Stoic leader's first battleground isn't the boardroom, it's their own body. Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire from horseback while battling chronic illness, wrote, "Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought, for the human spirit is colored by such impressions." He wasn't just speaking metaphorically. Modern neuroscience confirms what the Stoics practiced. Physical vitality isn't separate from mental clarity, it's the foundation. When researchers at the University of Edinburgh tracked executives over a decade, they found those who exercised regularly made 19% faster decisions under pressure and demonstrated 23% greater emotional resilience during crises. The ancient Stoics called this mens sana in corpore sano, a sound mind in a sound body, but their approach was anything but theoretical. Consider the ritual of Theodore Roosevelt, a statesman who embodied Stoic principles. Despite asthma nearly killing him as a child, He transformed his body through relentless exercise, boxing at dawn, hiking with heavy packs, even skinny, dipping in the Potomac in winter. His famous, strenuous life philosophy wasn't about machismo. It was about conditioning the vessel that carried his leadership. Like the Stoics who trained in wrestling and running not for vanity but for virtue, Roosevelt understood that a body neglected becomes a mind distracted. Pain tolerance built in the gym translates to stress tolerance in negotiations. Discipline in physical routine fuels discipline in decision-making. Fast forward to today, where a Silicon Valley CEO starts each morning not with emails, but with what he calls the Iron Protocol, at 20 minutes of kettlebell swings, pull-ups, and breathwork. His logic: if I can conquer the discomfort of a 200-pound clean and press at 6 a.m., investor meetings at noon feel like playground conversations. This isn't biohacking, it's modern Stoicism. The weights become his memento mori, reminding him that strength, both physical and mental, isn't given but forged. Now turn the lens on yourself. When's the last time you treated your body as the first draft of your leadership, not as a cosmetic project, but as the infrastructure supporting every decision, every tough conversation, every late-night crisis? The Stoics would prescribe a simple audit. What's one physical limitation currently undermining your potential? Maybe it's the afternoon energy crash from poor sleep, or the stiff shoulders from hours hunched over screens that shorten your patience in meetings. Here's the challenge: pick one lever: strength, stamina, flexibility, recovery, and attack it for 30 days like your leadership depends on it, because it does. A startup founder I know began tracking her sleep with the same rigor as her KPIs, discovering that just 30 more minutes of deep rest cut her impulsive decisions by half. Another executive replaced his sugary mid-morning snack with protein and walnuts, noticing his post-lunch focus sharpened enough to spot a critical contract flaw others missed. These aren't lifestyle tweaks, they're force multipliers. Tonight, try this Stoic exercise. Stand barefoot on cold tile or grass for 60 seconds. Feel the discomfort, then ask, if I can't master this small sensation, how will I handle the real storms? The body isn't just a temple, it's the training ground where your leadership gets its edge. And the barbell, the yoga mat, or the running trail becomes your philosopher's stone, turning base metal into gold. You pack your bags, book the flight, and tell yourself this time will be different: new city, new energy, a fresh start. But here's the uncomfortable truth the Stoics uncovered 2,000 years ago. No amount of passport stamps can outrun the baggage you carry in your mind. Seneca saw this clearly when he wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Do you suppose you alone have had this experience of setting out for a distant goal only to find dissatisfaction tagging along?" He was calling out a human tendency we still wrestle with today, mistaking movement for progress and geography for growth. Look at the rise of digital nomad culture, millions chasing productivity and peace across Bali beaches or Lisbon coworking spaces, yet so many report the same anxieties simply resurfacing in prettier time zones. A study by Remote Year found that 42% of location-independent workers struggled with loneliness, while 38% admitted they'd used travel to avoid personal issues back home. The Stoics would nod knowingly when Seneca observed wealthy Romans constantly changing villas, building new piers where the sea annoyed them. He wasn't criticizing wanderlust, he was warning against the delusion that external change alone can fix internal unrest. So where does this leave the genuine seeker, the person who craves both adventure and depth? The Stoic approach is radical in its simplicity. Travel not to escape, but to engage. When Marcus Aurelius led military campaigns across the empire, he used those grueling journeys as mobile classrooms. In his meditations, written by torchlight in army tents, he reflected not on exotic sights, but on the common humanity he witnessed in every province. That's the Stoic reframe. Movement becomes meaningful when it sharpens your presence rather than diluting it. Try this exercise next time you feel the itch to flee your circumstances. Before searching for flights, ask Seneca's piercing question. What part of this discomfort follows me no matter where I go? Maybe it's procrastination disguised as wanderlust or relational patterns that replay in every ebb. The digital nomad who trades coffee shops in Brooklyn for ones in Bangkok without addressing his avoidance of deep work isn't solving anything. He's just decorating his distraction. Here's the alternative the Stoics practiced. Use travel as a mirror, not a medication. When you hike that mountain, notice who you become on the trail, the patience required, the resilience uncovered. When you navigate foreign streets, observe how you handle confusion and missteps. The value isn't in the scenery change, it's in the self-revelation that only comes when routines are disrupted. A tech executive I coach realized this after 6 months of workations. What finally grounded her wasn't finding the perfect destination, but recognizing that her restlessness stemmed from never being fully anywhere physically present in meetings, but mentally already plotting the next escape. Tonight, whether you're dreaming of distant shores or unpacking from a recent trip, try this Stoic audit. List 3 things you hoped travel would fix or fulfill. Now ask, could I cultivate this right where I am? Not to discourage exploration, but to ensure you're seeking it for the right reasons. Because the great irony is this: those who stop running from themselves often find the whole world opens up to meet them, not as an escape, but as an extension of their growth. The most transformative journey isn't measured in miles, but in the inches of self-awareness gained each time you resist the fantasy that happiness lives in another zip code. Stoic innovation starts with a counterintuitive question: what if everything you assume about the problem is wrong? While modern brainstorming often focuses on generating more ideas, the Stoics practiced subtraction, stripping away layers of convention to reveal the raw truth underneath. This approach, called first principles thinking, was their secret weapon for breakthroughs. Picture a sculptor not adding clay, but chiseling away marble until the essential form emerges. Take the tech startup founder struggling to compete with industry giants. Conventional wisdom says she needs more funding, flashier marketing, or better office perks to attract talent. The Stoic approach, she starts by dismantling every assumption. Do we really need an office? Is venture capital the only path? What if our competitors are actually collaborators in disguise? By questioning these foundations, she discovers her real advantage, building a fully remote team of niche experts scattered across 4 continents, slashing overhead while tapping global talent. This isn't just cost-cutting, it's philosophical problem-solving in action. Marcus Aurelius modeled this when faced with logistical nightmares during military campaigns. Instead of complaining about limited supplies, he asked, what if scarcity is our advantage? His troops traveled lighter, moved faster, and outmaneuvered heavier armies. Centuries later, Elon Musk applied the same first principles thinking to rocket costs, refusing to accept the aerospace industry's standard pricing. He calculated the raw material costs from scratch and built SpaceX around that reality. Now turn this lens on your own challenges. What unchallenged assumptions are propping up your frustrations? Maybe it's the belief that promotions only come through tenure, or that certain tasks have to be done a certain way. The Stoics would challenge you to conduct an assumption autopsy. Take one stubborn problem and dissect it with 3 questions. 1. What are we pretending is immutable that's actually flexible? Example, meetings must be an hour. 2. What would this look like if it were simple? Example, a 3-sentence email replacing a 30-minute check in 3. What resources are we overlooking because they don't fit traditional models? Example, retirees as part-time consultants instead of inexperienced interns. A hospital administrator used this method to reduce patient wait times. Instead of adding staff, the expensive default, his team questioned why check-ins required 15 forms. By redesigning the process around 2 essential questions: what brings you in today? And has anything changed since your last visit? They cut paperwork by 70% and doubled throughput. That's Stoic innovation, not doing more with more, but revealing what's possible when you dare to dismantle the obvious. Tonight, try this exercise. Pick one routine frustration, say your overflowing inbox. Now ask, if this process were invented today from scratch, with no legacy systems to accommodate, how would it work? The answer might not involve email at all, because here's the truth the Stoics carved into their problem-solving. The most revolutionary solutions often come not from seeing what's invisible, but from finally noticing what's been hiding in plain sight all along. We've all scrolled through envy, that gut punch moment when someone else's promotion, vacation, or seemingly perfect life flashes across our screens, and suddenly our own achievements feel hollow. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery before teaching emperors, diagnosed this ache with brutal clarity. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. At first glance, that sounds like a platitude, but unpack it, and you'll find a surgical strategy for dismantling envy at its root. The Stoics didn't just advise ignoring jealousy, they exposed it as a trick of perspective, a misplacement of value that corrodes joy without offering anything in return. Consider the modern phenomenon of compare and despair. A study from the University of Copenhagen found that people who took week-long breaks from social media reported significantly higher life satisfaction, not because their circumstances changed, but because they stopped measuring their reality against curated highlight reels. The Stoic approach aligns eerily with this data. When Epictetus taught, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it," he was targeting envy's antidote, redirecting energy from others' timelines to your own growth. Picture 2 gardeners, one obsessively eyeing their neighbor's blooms while their own plants wilt, the other focused on nurturing what's in their own soil. Both have the same hours in a day, but only one harvests results. Now, bring this home. Who lives rent-free in your mind as a comparison benchmark? Maybe it's the college friend whose startup valuation eclipses yours, or the influencer whose effortless routine makes your daily grind feel inadequate. Here's the Stoic reframe: envy is just misplaced admiration. That colleague's promotion isn't a judgment on your worth, it's proof that the qualities you respect, hard work, creativity, actually bear fruit. The key isn't to suppress the feeling, but to transmute it. Every twinge of envy carries a hidden message about what you value. Your task is to mine that insight, then invest it back into your own path. Try this detox exercise. For 1 week, track every envy trigger in a notes app, not to judge yourself, but to spot patterns. You might notice they cluster around specific themes: creative recognition, financial freedom, relational harmony. Those aren't flaws, they're clues. Now take one item from your list and ask, what's one small step I could take today toward this in my own life? Not to catch up, but to honor your values authentically. The blogger you envy for her audience might inspire you to finally launch that newsletter. The friend with the serene morning routine could motivate you to wake 30 minutes earlier for meditation. Here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered: the less you fixate on others' gardens, the more your own begins to flourish. Envy shrinks when purpose expands. So tonight, as you charge your phone, try charging your perspective too. Place it face down and ask Epictetus' question, what's already mine to rejoice in? That quiet space between scrolling and comparing, that's where your real power grows. Gratitude isn't just good manners, it's a neurological superpower. Studies from UCLA reveal that regularly practicing gratitude lights up the prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center for decision-making and emotional regulation. Marcus Aurelius knew this intuitively when he began each day listing what he called morning thanks, not grand privileges, but simple gifts like fresh water, a functioning body, or the chance to learn from others. He wasn't performing positivity, he was wiring his mind to spot opportunities where others saw obstacles. Modern research echoes this. Employees who keep a gratitude journal for just 3 weeks show a 23% increase in problem-solving agility and team collaboration. That's not coincidence, it's neuroplasticity in action. Take a CEO facing a quarterly loss. The average leader might spiral into blame or panic. The Stoic trained leader starts by noting what's still working: a loyal team, a key client who renewed, even the lesson hidden in the setback. This isn't denial, it's strategic focus. A Harvard Business School study found that leaders who model gratitude see their teams take 27% fewer sick days and demonstrate 40% higher innovation rates. Why? Because gratitude shifts the brain from scarcity to resourcefulness. When a chef is thankful for 5 ingredients instead of lamenting the missing 6th, creativity thrives. Now try this experiment. Pause right now and name 3 things within arm's reach that you're grateful for. Not the obvious ones, but the easily overlooked. The pen that never skips, the chair that supports your posture, the silence allowing you to focus. That's the Stoic twist. Gratitude isn't reserved for milestones. It's a daily discipline that trains your attention like a muscle. Navy SEAL use a version of this during Hell Week when exhaustion hits. They're taught to whisper, "Thank you," for the burning in their legs, proof they're pushing limits, or the cold night air sharpening their alertness. Here's the deeper alchemy at work. Gratitude doesn't just change how you feel, it changes what you notice. A sales director who starts meetings by acknowledging one contribution from each team member isn't just boosting morale, she's priming everyone to spot strengths instead of gaps. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive." That's not poetic fluff, it's operational fuel. The more you name your advantages, the more they multiply. Tonight, borrow a page from the Stoic playbook. Before sleep, jot down one friction point from your day, a missed deadline, a tense conversation. Now reframe it with gratitude. "I'm grateful this showed me where our process needs tightening," or "This reminded me to listen more deeply." Watch how the weight shifts. Because the Stoics uncovered a radical truth: gratitude isn't passive appreciation. It's the ultimate act of leadership, transforming what you have into what you need. Safe harbors don't make skilled captains. That's the Stoic truth hidden in every great voyage. Picture 2 ships, one stays anchored in the bay, its hull never tested by open water. The other battles waves, adjusts sails to shifting winds, and discovers new shores. Both remain afloat, but only one knows its true strength. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who amassed wealth through calculated ventures, put it bluntly: "Fortune favors the bold, but abandons the timid." He wasn't glorifying recklessness, he was mapping the difference between blind leaps and strategic risks. The Stoic approach to risk isn't about ignoring fear, it's about weighing what's at stake against what could be gained, then acting with eyes wide open. Take the story of a tech founder who left a stable Silicon Valley job to bootstrap a niche software tool. For months, he worked from his garage, pouring savings into an idea experts called too specialized. The Stoic question he asked wasn't, "What if I fail?" but, "What's the cost of not trying?" 5 years later, his company dominates a market giants overlooked, precisely because he targeted a need others deemed too small. That's Seneca's wisdom in action. Risks aren't just hazards, they are filters separating those who settle from those who stretch. Now, consider your own life. What smart risk have you been sidestepping? Maybe it's pitching an unconventional idea at work, or finally launching that side project you've over-researched. The Stoics would challenge you to dissect that hesitation. Is it genuine prudence or fear masquerading as caution? Here's their litmus test. If the worst-case scenario wouldn't destroy you, and the best case could transform your trajectory, the risk isn't just justified, it's necessary. History's most enduring leaders understood this. When Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat, she didn't act impulsively. She'd trained for that moment through years of calculated activism. The risk wasn't taken lightly, but it was taken deliberately. That's the Stoic balance. Preparation meets opportunity with courage as the bridge. Tonight, try this exercise. Write down one risk you've been circling. Below it, chart 2 columns, cost of failure and cost of inaction. Often, you'll find the second column carries the heavier price. Because the harbor might feel safe, but ships like legacies aren't built to stay docked forever. The modern leader's calendar is a battlefield, back-to-back meetings, flashing notifications, and the gnawing guilt that any moment not spent producing is a moment wasted. But here's the Stoic counterintuition. True leisure isn't the enemy of productivity. It's the forge where clarity and creativity are tempered. Seneca sliced through this tension with surgical precision. Leisure without study is death, a tomb for the living man. He wasn't condemning rest, he was redefining it. To the Stoics, leisure wasn't mindless scrolling or binge-watching. It was the intentional space where the mind, freed from urgent demands, could wrestle with deeper questions. Picture 2 executives on vacation. One spends hours refreshing work emails by the pool. The other reads philosophy and takes long walks to reflect. Both return physically rested, but only one comes back transformed. Consider the irony of our always-on culture. A Stanford study found that employees who take regular, undistracted breaks are actually 13% more productive. The Stoics knew this 2,000 years before productivity hacks became trendy. Seneca's letters to Lucilius are filled with urgings to withdraw into yourself regularly, not as escapism, but as recalibration. He described true leisure as active rest, reading to stretch your thinking, journaling to distill insights, or engaging in dialogue that sharpens your perspective. Contrast this with what he called the laziness of busy people, filling every gap with trivial distractions that leave the soul more exhausted than before. Here's the challenge. For the next 48 hours, conduct a digital detox with Stoic intentionality. Silence non-essential notifications. Designate 1 hour each morning and evening as Seneca time. No screens, just reflection, reading, or conversation. Track the difference in your mental acuity and emotional resilience. A Wall Street banker who tried this reported an unexpected side effect. Her best deal-making insights started arriving not at her desk, but during these deliberate pauses. That's the Stoic secret. Leisure isn't empty space, it's the fertile ground where fragmented thoughts coalesce into breakthroughs. Now, ask yourself, what would it look like to recharge this weekend like a Stoic? Maybe it's finally cracking open that book that's been gathering dust on your nightstand, or taking a solitary hike to let your mind wander without agenda. The test isn't how relaxed you feel in the moment, but how renewed you are when Monday arrives, because the Stoics measured leisure not in hours spent, but in wisdom gained. Your to-do list can wait, your growth can't. Even the most disciplined Stoics faced betrayal. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote about those who will obstruct you. But they can't prevent you from acting justly. That's the painful paradox of betrayal. It reveals others' character while testing your own. Consider the entrepreneur who discovered her business partner had secretly diverted funds. The initial sting wasn't just financial, it was the erosion of trust, the rewriting of shared history. The Stoic response begins not with suppressing anger, but with interrogating it. What did I actually lose is the first question, not the money or the partnership. Those were always temporary. The real injury is the story you tell yourself. How could I have been so blind? Here's where Stoicism pivots from pain to power. Epictetus, betrayed as a slave before becoming a philosopher, taught that betrayal is like handing someone else the keys to your mental state. The moment you outsource your peace to others' loyalty, you've already surrendered. A modern executive who uncovered his CFO's embezzlement applied this by asking, "Does his dishonesty negate my integrity?" The answer became his compass. He pursued legal action calmly, not as vengeance but as duty to employees, investors, and his own principles. Marcus Aurelius offered a tactical reframe. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. When a colleague spreads lies, excellence becomes your counterargument. When a friend abandons you, unwavering kindness exposes their scarcity. This isn't passive forgiveness, it's strategic elevation. A restaurant owner whose chef left to open a rival spot didn't trash talk. He doubled down on staff development and community ties. Within a year, his betrayer's venture folded from high turnover, while his own team's loyalty became his competitive edge. Now, the constructive response. First, distinguish the person from the lesson. Betrayal often highlights blind spots in your discernment. Maybe you ignored red flags or equated generosity with immunity from harm. Second, audit your circle. Stoics practiced prosauch attentiveness to the company they kept. Third, and most crucially, redirect energy from resentment to reconstruction. After a betrayal, write 2 lists. What I control, your boundaries, your next move, and what I don't, their remorse, others' opinions. The gap between them is where your power lies. Because here's the truth the Stoics carved into their resilience. Betrayal doesn't define you, your response etches your legacy. The wound may ache, but the scar becomes wisdom. And wisdom, unlike trust, can never be stolen. How will people speak your name 100 years from now? Not in terms of wealth or titles, but in the quiet moments when someone asks, what kind of leader were they? The Stoics measured success in centuries, not quarters. Marcus Aurelius, while leading an empire, wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." He wasn't talking about monuments or statues. He was describing the invisible threads of influence that outlast lifetimes. Consider the family-owned winery in Tuscany that's thrived for 12 generations. Each steward made decisions not just for next season's harvest, but for the grandchildren they'd never meet. When a storm destroyed their oldest vines in 1983, the current owner replanted with grape varieties that wouldn't mature for 25 years. That Stoic legacy, thinking, sacrificing immediate gain for enduring impact. Legacy isn't about leaving footprints, it's about preparing the path. Seneca illustrated this with a powerful metaphor. A good person plants trees under whose shade they'll never sit. Modern research confirms this mindset's power. Companies that prioritize long-term impact over short-term profits outperform their peers by 46% over 15 years. But here's where Stoicism adds nuance. Legacy building isn't just about grand gestures. It's the daily discipline of aligning small choices with larger purpose. The teacher who stays late to mentor a struggling student, the engineer who documents her process for future teams, the parent who models integrity in mundane moments. These are the architects of true legacy. Now bring this to your work. That project you're rushing to finish, how might its design serve users a decade from now? That team you're leading, what cultural seeds are you planting that will grow long after your promotion? A tech CEO I admire starts leadership meetings with a simple question. If our company vanished tomorrow, what would the obituary say? That jarring perspective cuts through quarterly targets to reveal enduring values. Tonight, try this Stoic exercise. Light a candle and write 2 letters, one from your future self thanking you for choices made today, another warning of regrets. Place them where you'll see them tomorrow morning, because legacy isn't built in the dramatic final act, it's composed in the quiet daily scenes where you choose the harder right over the easier wrong. The irony, the more you act with eternity in mind, the richer each present moment becomes. Your mind is your ultimate stronghold, a fortress no external force can breach without your permission. The Stoics called this the Inner Citadel, a mental sanctuary where your core values and peace remain untouched, no matter the chaos outside its walls. Marcus Aurelius described it in his Meditations as the place where you have power over your mind, not outside events, a concept he refined during grueling military campaigns where survival depended on mental resilience more than physical strength. Consider the story of Admiral James Stockdale, shot down over Vietnam and held as a prisoner of war for 7.5 years. Tortured repeatedly, denied basic necessities, and kept in solitary confinement. Stockdale credited Stoicism, specifically the teachings of Epictetus, for his survival. He later wrote, "You must never confuse the faith that you will prevail in the end with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality." That's the inner citadel in action, an unshakable belief in one's principles, paired with the clarity to face hardship without illusion. Stockdale didn't hope for rescue every day. He focused on controlling what he could: his attitude, his dignity, his ability to communicate covertly with fellow prisoners. The guards could shackle his body, but his mind remained sovereign. Marcus Aurelius built his own citadel through daily mental drills. He'd visualize worst-case scenarios: betrayal, illness, even death, not to despair, but to inoculate himself against fear. He wrote, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting." In modern terms, he was practicing cognitive reframing long before psychology coined the term. When faced with a treacherous advisor or a battlefield setback, he didn't waste energy railing against injustice. He retreated to his inner citadel, assessed his options with icy clarity, and acted. Your inner citadel isn't built in a day. Like any fortress, it requires deliberate construction, strong walls of principle, gates of discernment to filter what enters, and a well of resilience to draw from when under siege. Start small. This week, identify one mental breach, a recurring worry, a toxic influence, or a distraction that hijacks your focus. Then reinforce it. If social media drains your peace, set strict boundaries. If a colleague's negativity seeps in, practice the Stoic pause. Take a breath before reacting, reclaiming control over your response. Tonight, try this exercise. Light a candle and sit in silence for 5 minutes. With each exhale, imagine strengthening your mental walls. With each inhale, affirm, "This is my sanctuary." Because here's the truth the Stoics knew: the world will always have storms, but no tempest can flood a citadel built higher than circumstance. Your mind doesn't just endure, it commands. The question isn't whether you'll face battles, but whether you've fortified the place where victory is decided, within. The power of these 38 Stoic insights lies not in their complexity, but in their compounding effect. like drops of water slowly carving canyons into stone. What begins as a single decision to focus only on what you control, or one morning spent visualizing challenges ahead, gradually reshapes your entire existence. Leadership isn't forged in grand, sweeping gestures, but in the quiet repetition of showing up as your best self when no one's watching. Every time you pause before reacting, every moment you choose principle over convenience, you're not just passing time, you're etching your legacy into the world. History's most enduring leaders understood this. George Washington's strength didn't come from his military victories alone, but from the daily discipline of returning power to the people. Rosa Parks' courage wasn't a single act of defiance. It was the culmination of years of small, steadfast choices to live with dignity. The Stoics knew that true transformation happens in the margins. The extra minute you spend listening instead of interrupting, the uncomfortable truth you speak when silence would be easier, the effort you make to lift others even when you're weary. These are the threads that weave an unshakable character. Marcus Aurelius left us a rarely quoted gem in his private writings. The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. Wipe away the dust of indifference and keep clarifying your vision, not as a task to complete but as a fire to tend daily. That's the heart of Stoic growth. Not arriving at some perfect endpoint, but committing to the endless refinement of who you are and how you serve. So here's your challenge. Don't let this video be another piece of consumed content. Before the day ends, implement one insight that resonated most deeply. Maybe it's writing your first evening reflection or having that difficult conversation you've avoided. Perhaps it's simply pausing the next time frustration arises and asking, what would wisdom do here? Action is the bridge between philosophy and legacy. And if this journey has sparked something in you, pass it forward. Share your Stoic experiment with someone who needs it, not as advice but as a lived example. Because the highest form of leadership isn't just building your own strength, it's becoming the kindling that ignites it in others. The conversation continues below. What's the first insight you'll put into practice? Your story might be the nudge someone else needs to begin theirs. The porch of the Stoics is always open, and the next seat is yours.